Hello, everyone. Welcome to 2024 US Africa Diaspora Summit. Thank you for joining us this very day, May 25th, 2024. Uh, I want to say thank you if you're live to come on board and join us in celebrating Africa Day. Uh, Today, we're commemorating the 61st anniversary since the creation of Africa Union, which was formerly OAU. All over the world, globally, everybody's chanting and celebrating Africa Day at 61. But here we are at Said Institute coming together to celebrate and also to offer solution for what the continent means to us. What the continent means to me might be different for what it means to each and every one of us. But for me, I'm a Pan-Africanist. And what does that mean? A Pan-Africanist is someone who supports the solidarity and also the unification of Africans worldwide. And that is me. Apart from that, being a Pan-Africanist, I also run an organization called SAID Institute, where we are now. It's called SAID Institute as an acronym, but the meaning is Society for Africans and Diaspora. So welcome all, welcome to the 2024 US Africa Diaspora Summit at SAID Institute. Like I said, I want to talk about what is near and dear to my heart, which is Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism is an ideology that asserts and supports the solidarity of Africans worldwide. It stresses on the fact that our unity as Africa, not only on the continent alone, but in the diaspora, is vital, a part of the economic and social progress in terms of the continent's survival. Africa is rising, and I, Adebo Folonsho, accept the challenges for the unification and the progress of Africa to make it the next big thing, not only as a diaspora, not only as a Pan-Africanist, but as Black as well. So today I ask you this very question. You can all imagine if Africans, we Africans or Black love Africa the way the rest of the world love its resources, Africa will have moved forward, and Africa will be in a better position. And Africa will not rely on foreign aid, and Africa will be better and bigger in its resources and its progress. So I welcome the challenges that Africa offer, and we're here to offer solutions and to also discuss the challenges and the progress we've made. But this idea of us gathering together today is an idea that came about 61 years ago when our forefather met in Addis Ababa to offer solution and to offer the unification of Africans worldwide. We're doing the same thing. We're calling all our friends globally to chime in and just speak and also offer solutions to the challenges that Africa faces. So it's an idea of the Queen singer from Angola, and it's an idea of Kwame Nkrumah from Ghana that we should all come together. It's an idea that Mandela supports, and we're all doing the same thing today, coming together to offer solution to the challenges that's faced in Africa, and also to talk about the achievement that has been made and the progress that we're going to tap into. Thank you all for joining us today. I will pass it on to the pilot of the day, Nia Black and Sam K. Taking on, my friend.
Thank you so much, Deborah Folorunshaw. Deborah, you know how much I appreciate you being the executive director here at said institute. Your love for the continent is next to none. We truly, truly appreciate all your efforts and all of the events you have to engage and bridge the diaspora and push us forward. Hi, everybody, and welcome, welcome, welcome. I see a lot of smiley faces. This is exciting. We are so happy to have each and every one of you joining us here, but those that are online and those that are here in person. And just to give you more context, I am live here at said institute, and I tell you the energy is always next to none. Everyone fighting for the goal of bridging the gap and pushing the continent of Africa forward. So again, welcome to the said institute virtual event in celebration of Africa Day. As Deborah mentioned, the African Union celebrates 61 years. That is not an easy thing, and that is not a small thing. It is something that we should be excited for. Now, the theme for today's event is US Africa Diaspora Summit, unlocking Africa's potential through diaspora engagement and entrepreneurship development. As always, as Deborah said, I'm super honored to be your host. My name is Nia Black Amuzi. I'm a Nigerian and I am based here in Houston, Texas. I am a media personality here in Houston, and I own the media company Nia Black Studios, which focuses on having conversations that focuses on what's happening across the diaspora. Now, I'm going to be your host, as I mentioned, for today's event. But I am not going to be doing this alone. I have an amazing, special co-host joining us today. My beautiful sister. Before I mention her name, as y'all have heard several times already, I do want to highlight her bio because it is exceptional and extremely impressive. She is an acclaimed international speaker, award-winning wealth coach, best-selling author, and a women's empowerment advocate with over 13 years of experience in personal finance. She is the founder, the co-founder, and CEO of TWAA, which is a women's social commerce technology platform. Please join in welcoming my co-host for today, Samke Nshongo. Samke, you dear sis?
Thank you so much, Nia. Thank you so much for the warm welcome and a very warm hello, Sanbonani. From Johannesburg, my name is Samke Mhlongo, and I am absolutely honored to have been invited to contribute to this global conversation around the Africa Diaspora Summit and also in celebration of Africa Day. I am absolutely thrilled to be able to provide some insights from Africa as a Pan-African citizen myself. As Debo is, I'm very passionate about seeing the advancement of not only the African continent, but also of all of Africa's descendants. And so, Nia, I know we are spearheading a very interesting conversation about bridging the gap and about creating that one global community of Africans on the continent and that the diaspora as well. So I'm looking forward to today's engagement and discussion.
Thank you, Samke. And can I just say, I'm coming to your closet afterwards to take on this outfit because, for lack of better words, or in a very colloquial term, it is given. It's given what it's supposed to give. You're shining so bright, sis. I love it. I love it.
It's our time, Africa. Your time is now. And I love the fact that you are dressed in what wouldn't traditionally be considered African attire. And I was having a conversation with one of my sisters who is based in New York to say, we need to dispel this idea that to be African, you need to look a certain way, you need to dress a certain way, you need to speak a certain way. And being African is not necessarily because you were born in Africa, but because Africa is born in you. And so part of this conversation and part of my contribution would be to say that we as Africans need to be able to celebrate ourselves and show up as ourselves however we choose to do so.
I love it. Super empowering. Thank you so much, Samke. I am looking forward to learning not just only from you, but from everyone on the panel. So let me just give you all a breakdown of today's agenda so that we can move forward with the program of today. We have 9 speakers scheduled to speak today, and each speaker will be speaking for 5 minutes each. Okay, Samke and I are going to take turns introducing each speaker. Now, we do ask you to be very succinct, very, just straightforward to the point. And at the very end of the agenda, at closing, we're going to have a time of Q&A, a time of sharing, a time of debrief as we close out this important event that will set the tone for what's to come in the future. Now, each speaker will be speaking on 2 different topics. They selected what topic they want to speak on. And these 2 topics focuses on, 1, accelerating creativity and innovation in Africa, forgive me. And then the second topic is bridging to the diaspora, bridging the gap across the diaspora. So again, each speaker will be speaking on one or the other, and we will make sure that once we introduce the speaker, we're going to be highlighting what topic they will be referencing. So without any further delay, I want to transition this over to Samke to lead us with the first speaker of today.
Yes, thank you so much, Nia. I am very excited to be introducing our first speaker, who is a fellow South African sister, and she is currently based in New York City. I am speaking about Ukgaofi Mampane, who is the Consul, Political and Trade Affairs at the South African Consulate General in New York. She's responsible for identifying new markets, opportunities for South Africa, and developing market strategies on entering new markets. She assists companies with obtaining market intelligence and understanding the nuances of policy, political, and investment risks, including identifying key markets for their products. She has previously served as Vice Consul at the South African Consulate General in Munich, Germany. I'd like to introduce now and hand over to Ukgaofi Mampane.
Good afternoon, good morning, from wherever you're joining. Thank you so much, Samke. What a lovely introduction that you've given. Thank you to Nia also. I mean, this is such a wonderful day for all Africans across the world, but particularly for me as a young South African and African to be part of this conversation this afternoon. So when Said reached out and asked me to be part of the speakers for this discussion, I think it was a natural progression for me to consider the creative industry and the value that it can actually bring into the continent in terms of economic development. This largely stems from just my own interactions with the industry and how I've been able to work with other young creatives from the continent and from South Africa to sort of develop their products and their industries and catapult them into the international economy. The creative industry is a very key sector for Africa, given its propensity to grow the economy and develop it. And it also serves as a key economic diversification because it will reduce our dependency on what has become a depleting resource, so volatile commodities that Africa has been trading in extensively. The reason why this industry is so critical and crucial is because it straddles industries. It goes from fashion, film, music to, of course, the recently added digital content creation industry, which has been a solid contender for mainstream media and a place where you find a lot of young people seeking and wanting to participate. I think it's also very important for me to underscore this. The creative industry has the ability to create jobs and harness and develop new skills, which previously did not exist or were available for African creatives. And so it also gives us the opportunity to export our culture, our music, our songs, our fashion, and simply because it has the ability to transcend age, gender, language, and beliefs. It's really a crucial bedrock for all countries because it allows us to foster deeper understanding of who we are, what we are about, and what we stand for when we look at the people-to-people exchanges. For a very long time, there has been this extensive focus on more hard economics, where we are trading on commodities or products. But we realize that more and more as we start trading or considering the creative industry as a trade component, we're able to sort of cut across the deep and more difficult or nuanced politics and reach to the depths of people and understanding that will enable us to understand one another when we are in conversation and when we start dealing with more dense and difficult topics such as wars and discrimination. And so I believe that the creative industry really serves as a crucial bedrock for us as people to understand one another. When we look at how Africa has been able to sort of start participating in this industry, we can't do so without considering digital transformation. The widespread adoption of smartphones and internet access has by and large democratized content creation and allowed young people to also participate effectively in this industry. What it has also done for them is it has allowed them to go into spaces that they would have otherwise not had access to. The fact that you're able to go beyond your own local borders and reach audiences globally means that your ideas, your product is able to reach more customers than they would have without all of these digital platforms. It's also important to highlight that platforms such as YouTube, Instagram, TikTok have allowed creators to be able to expand their audience and their reach. It has also been able to allow us to share our stories and to control the narrative, which is something that we haven't been able to do with mainstream media. And so it goes without saying that the creative industry is really a crucial industry for the development and economic growth of Africa. That will just be my introduction. There's more to say about this, but I'll just allow the conversation to sort of feed into the inputs that I would like to share.
Thank you so much for that, Ukhalfi. And you are speaking right to the heart of what we do at TWA Community, recognizing the rich creative talents that Africans have, and also the fact that they can traverse geographical borders in exporting that talent, and more importantly, in monetizing that talent to create incomes for themselves and even employment opportunities through the supporting sectors that are involved in content creation and especially digital content creation. What are your thoughts on this, Nia? I think Nia may be on mute if she's speaking.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can, Nia. Over to you.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you so much, Samke. You know, technology is our friend sometimes, but not always our friend. But I do echo all of your sentiment. And I just want to thank you all so much for adding tremendous value to today's conversation. At this time, I'm going to transition into our next speaker. Our next speaker is Georgie Badil Liberty. She is a model and activist living and working in New York City. Badil was Miss Burkina Faso in 2003 and Miss Africa in 2004. She worked with Glossy magazine as well as with major designers such as Louis Vuitton, Marc Jacobs, and others in America and Europe. Married to Liberian-American entrepreneur Chid Liberty in 2018. The wedding ceremony was covered in a glowing full-page New York Times article. And so by the time she got hitched, she had already reinvented herself as a successful social entrepreneur and author living a new African dream. Her best-selling book is titled The Water Princess. Please join me, everyone, online, in person, in welcoming Georgie Badil Liberty.
Wow, Nia, that was, thank you so much. That was such an amazing introduction. That is, you are making it very hard for me to follow up. Thank you so much. Happy Africa Diaspora Day to everyone. My heritage is everything to me. You know, Africa is everything to me. And what inspired me to start my organization, the Georgie Badil Foundation, is that I used to walk 3 hours to fetch water with my grandmother. I was blessed to become Miss Burkina Faso, then Miss Africa. Following that, I went to Paris to start an international modeling career. And I went back home to visit my sister, who was almost 9 months pregnant. And I have to watch my sister waking up between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. to get water. that is when I actually knew actually nothing has changed home. And the blessing God have given me, I have to use it to also be a service to the people from my community. So I founded the Georgie Badiel Foundation in 2015, and in 9 years, we were able to bring clean water to nearly 400,000 people, which I'm very thankful for. But what is most important about what the Georgie Badiel Foundation do is that Burkina Faso have over 9,000 broken wells. So imagine, to build one is 10,000, and we have 9,000 of those that are broken. When I started my organization, I would go to villages, I would see a well, and I asked women, where do you go get your water? The answer were like, we walk 3 hours, 4 hours away from here to get water. And my response was like, why don't you fix this one? And the answer was like, we don't know. I said, all right, no problem. I called the engineer of my organization and we created a program for them. Now we are able to teach local women basic engineering. And most of these women never been to school. That is what make the Georgie Badiel Foundation very innovative in what we do. Outside of the non-for-profit world, my lovely husband and I, we created Liberty and Justice, which is a swimsuit brand that is sold in Target and is 100% made in Africa. So for us, creating a made in Africa brand was everything. We didn't want to be another brand that come in and just sell clothes. It didn't make sense to us. Creating job on the continent means the world to us. Caring and loving our brothers and sisters by giving them dignity, right? When you have a job that pays you to feed your family, to take care of your family, that's dignity. So for us, it was very important that our swimsuit line focus on that. And on the fashion side, what we do is that 100% of the fabric that a swimsuit are, I design it with African prints, African inspiration. The next collection coming up, the most famous print is the Independence print, and we have the cassava leaf print. So I hope you would stop by Target and get to discover and maybe get a piece if you love it. But we have abada as well. So you rocking your beautiful abada on the beaches is beautiful. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Georgie. I do have a follow-up question for you. Did you say, and forgive me if I didn't capture this correctly, but did you say that you've given access to water to over 400,000 people?
Correct. I said that.
Amazing. So amazing. I am beyond stunned. I think just what I gathered from all of your accomplishment is that you are the perfect example of doing. You're the perfect example of seeing a problem and moving forward with the solution. And this is something I believe everyone needs to emulate across the diaspora. Before you go and we transition to the next speaker, give us just one line, just say something to people to encourage them to push forward and to do what you did, right? To help the community, to help the continent. What would you like to say to people? Just a one-liner.
Thank you, Nia. I would say that to me personally, Africa is my soul. As we as Africans have to do everything in our power to lift up our brothers and sisters in the continent.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Georgie. It's been such a pleasure. I'm going to transition now.
Thank you for having me. I'm very grateful to be here. Thank you so much. And to the whole team, thank you.
Thank you, Georgie. Thank you so much. We truly appreciate you. I'm going to transition over to Samke to introduce the next speaker.
Thank you so much, Nia, and very inspiring, Georgie, hearing how you have managed to commercialize 100% made in Africa product. When we keep hearing so much that once you make your products in Africa, they become uncompetitive in terms of pricing, and that's why we should always look to the East, such as China and Vietnam. And so you're an example of how we can dispel that notion and unlock efficiencies in the continent. Right, our next speaker, I am excited and humbled to introduce is Liz Fanning, who is Corps Africa's founder and Chief Executive Officer. A little bit about Liz. She is, as mentioned, the founder and Chief Executive of Peace Corps Africa, and she served as Peace Corps volunteer in Morocco between 1993 and 1995, and worked for a wide range of non-profit organizations, including the American Civil Liberties Union, Schoolhouse Supplies, and the Near East Foundation. She also served on numerous boards of directors, and she holds a BA in Economics and History from Boston University and a Master's in Public Administration from NYU's Robert F. Wagner Graduate School of Public Service. In 2019, she received the Sargent Shriver Award for Distinguished Humanitarian Service from the National Peace Corps Association. In 2021, she was an AARP Purpose Prize Fellow, and in 2022, she received the JFK Service Award from the Peace Corps. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Liz Fanning.
Thank you. Hello. Thank you so much, Samke, and to the Society for Africans in the Diaspora for having me. It's a great honor to be here. I'm not African, but as Samke noted, Africa is born in me. I served as a Peace Corps volunteer in Morocco, and I was so inspired by the eager, ambitious, extraordinary young Moroccans I met that I created Corps Africa to give them a chance to serve like Peace Corps volunteers, to be part of the solution, to live in a remote high poverty village in their own country for 1 year, and have the transformative experience of service. Corps Africa volunteers can then serve for a second year in another African country. Importantly for this audience, we invite young Africans from the diaspora to serve in their country of origin, which can be a bridge back home for them. Young people from the African diaspora straddle two worlds. The relationship between the US and Africa spans history, culture, economics, and shared aspirations and has been profound. The US and African nations increasingly engage to address mutual concerns such as security, governance, health, and climate change, which have proven beneficial for both parties, enhancing growth and opening markets. Culturally, the influence of the African diaspora in America has been monumental, not only within the US, but globally. The diaspora has been a conduit for the transfer of wealth, knowledge, and cultural values. They've exported African music and arts, promoting African culture worldwide and reshaping global perceptions of Africa. The strategic importance of African youth cannot be overstated. With some of the world's fastest growing economies, vast natural resources, and a burgeoning youth population, Africa is a frontier for opportunity. For the US, deepening ties with African nations through trade as well as programs like the Peace Corps means not only access to these opportunities, but also partnerships in developing solutions to global challenges. We must engage young Africans in Africa and the diaspora respectfully and fruitfully, recognizing that they will create our shared destiny. As President Biden said in his inaugural address, we lead not by the example of our power, but by the power of our example. The Peace Corps serves as an example of youth service and global friendship, and we strive to emulate that example with Corps Africa, opening doors for emerging leaders in Africa and the critical, powerful Pan-African youth movement that we're working so hard to create.
Dean Whitley.
Corps Africa volunteers had the courage to leave their comfort zones out of a strong desire to make the world a better place. And they go on to become leaders and productive citizens in their countries and around the world. They show us that youth are not a problem to be solved. They are the problem solvers. They are our most valuable resource. They are the future for Africa, America, and for all of us. Thank you and happy Africa Day.
Thank you so much for that, Liz. And thank you so much for highlighting the role that Africa's youth plays in the future of Africa, especially given that about 80% of sub-Saharan Africa is between 18 and 35. And so we need to ensure that not only are we positioning our youth to play a strategic role on the continent, but also globally, because we want to avoid us falling behind in the fourth industrial revolution. We want to capacitate them digitally. We want to capacitate them in terms of competitiveness, and we want to ensure that we are at the forefront of the next global economic revolution. I want to ask you one question, Liz, before I hand over to Nia for her input as well as to introduce the next speaker. Where do you think we have failed in the past in engaging and listening to the voice of the youth in Africa, and indeed in accepting and implementing their input in terms of where the continent should go?
That's a great question. Thank you. I think, like in so many efforts, I think we as people trying to help the youth and Africa and poverty and all of that, we want to be the savior, to do it for them, rather than recognize and respect how much they have to offer, and also that when we engage them, when we put them in the driver's seat,
Okay, let me see.
their solutions will be so much more sustainable.
Sorry, Liz. Can we all ensure that we have our mics muted, please? Because I'm hearing someone speaking over Liz. Mm-hmm. So all the speakers that are online or coming in, please make sure that you are muted. Sorry, Liz, I don't know if you'd finished making your point.
Just the point was that we need to trust young people to be the leaders, and to give them a role in the future, their own future and the continent's future.
And especially given the cultural nuances that exist in Africa and in our heritage of the elders being the ones that pass on knowledge to the youth instead of knowledge being passed from the youth to the elders, I think that it poses a unique challenge to not only our heritage, but how we then hold on to that heritage and perhaps adapt that heritage and that culture as we brace ourselves and indeed adapt to a new way of doing things. Nia, do you think you could tell your African mama to take your opinion on something, or would she tell you to go fly a kite in a tornado?
Samke, you already know. She's going to tell me to go fly a kite. You already know how our mothers are. But you know what? I feel like now a lot of mothers are changing. There's something going on around the world that people are getting more in tune. People are getting more aware thanks to social media, thanks to innovation, thanks to development. So, of course, not 100%, but compared to 10 years ago, we are making huge strides. So would you like me to continue on with our next speaker?
Yes, please. Please introduce our next speaker for us.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Samke. And Liz, thank you again for such a powerful speech. You did mention you're not African, but as Samke said earlier, Africa lives in you. And to be honest, that's all that matters. We are open to partnership. We're open to brothers and sisters across the world to work together with us. I do have an open question, but that will be in the end. We can answer that question for the sake of time. And my question everyone can start to think about is, how else can we involve the youth? How else? What are the methods, step-by-step methods to bring them in and lure them in? We know that they are the largest human capital we have in human resources, but what are the ways can we bring them into the conversation and help them to push the agenda forward? At this time, I will introduce our next speaker. I'm super honored to be introducing this speaker. She is Helen Chedza Chilisa, the Deputy Permanent Secretary of Entrepreneurial Development for Botswana. She is an accomplished advocate for transformational change, fostering a culture deeply embedded in principles of empathy, collaboration, transparency, and reciprocity. She is currently the public sector lead for Forbes 30 Under 30 Africa Summit. As a management executive, she has led nationwide change through an unparalleled synergy of entrepreneurship, aviation, community development, human services, and social innovation. Helen demonstrates exemplary leadership through her unique contribution to management and international cooperation initiative, such as benchmarking initiative with Canada, the US, the UK, and emerging markets in sub-Saharan Africa. Helen has a strong entrepreneurial mindset and culture change. She has also been instrumental in fostering sustainable partnership and advocacy, outreach and awareness, policy development, legislation, and standards, as well as building stakeholder relationship through lobbying and other events. Please join me now in welcoming on stage Helen Chilisa.
Good morning, ladies. Good morning. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay, that's good. I've just got a bit of a cold. I flew in yesterday into Canada from Botswana, so I don't know what happened when I was airborne. But anyway, it's such a pleasure to be with you, beautiful ladies, this morning, and happy Africa Day to you all. What an honor indeed. And I'm sure where our founding leaders of Africa are sitting, in heaven, as our ancestors today, this is the Africa that they were advocating for. This is the Africa that they'd wanted. In continuing from my previous speaker, Liz, I can attest the fact that Africa has never been ready for business as it is today. We are on reset mode, all hands on deck, and as we drive towards our Agenda 2036. Brothers and sisters in the diaspora, a summit like this is a demonstration of our commitment to helping Africa reach her potential. I mean, there are many programs out there, such as AGOA, that are there to help facilitate trade between Africa and the USA. And over and above that, there's so many programs that are happening again, across the two continents. I forgot to actually mention that I'm also an honorary member of the of the American Business Council in Botswana. I'm an honorary member there. Given my position, I can't sit on certain boards. So, I do advisory services to them and help connect the dots. There is a paradigm shift, in the mindset happening in Africa. I can also confirm to that, I know you have links in Africa, but I'm on the ground and I can just confirm the paradigm shift that is happening in our thinking. We're now having open and candid conversations with thought leaders across the continent and in the diaspora. Our leaders are now open to undergoing peer review, civil societies, private sector, and the public sector have a voice, in developing Africa's agenda, where we're able to find a win-win. Other African countries, in the sub-Saharan Africa, we've joined in this economic wave of economic reform and transformation. We don't want to be left out. Firstly, we had to, from a policy perspective, we spent some time going through the regulatory reforms. Yes, regulation was there, it had its good, and that good is no longer valid in today's time. So I can tell you, we have more good news coming out of Africa than bad news. The new buzzword amongst the corridors is the value chain development. We're talking more about, it's not just about entrepreneurship or SMMEs at first level, tier 1. Let's move it to tier 2, where we now do the value chain development. We need to add more value into our economy. We need to have more jobs and ultimately, to translate to revenue. Some lines that mark examples are the De Beers and Botswana negotiations. If you do recall, last year, Botswana was very adamant with De Beers that, no, this is a partnership. It's not going to be a 15% and 85%, where as a country where the diamonds are our minerals on our ground, why should we be disadvantaged? So Botswana went and had a very tough negotiation where we ended up at a 50-50. That is a true definition of partnership. And again, kudos to Ghana and the Ivory Coast, who also went into such candid conversations, such negotiations with regards to the cocoa industry, bring the value chains, bring the value into Africa, bring the jobs, bring the innovation too. So well done to that. That is just an example of, this is our commitment and our aggression, our intention, and we're so deliberate about growing the value chains. We've seen the thriving SMEs. Uganda today, it stands at 70% of the 70% of the national gross domestic, the GDP, is constituted by the SMEs. That is very, very big. and we see it in Kenya and East Africa, West Africa. We've got big numbers. And again, we can look at the priority areas that we're looking at. Agriculture, we need to address the food security. We have looked at the education, capacitating in the skills gap, looking at what the skills gaps are in Africa for us to move on to be able to achieve, the sustainable development goals. Mining, tourism. I mean, we're now launching new commodities exchanges that are being established in Africa, very much like the model of the Chicago Commodities Exchange. However, we're now bringing in the sophisticated elements such as the Dubai and Delaware exchanges. Ease of doing business has always been what has always been a bottleneck across Africa. But I can tell you today that the ease of doing business is becoming less complex and less complicated. FDI, remains one of those key priorities of Africa. I mean, today we see that we are hosting events in Africa, such as the US Africa Summit. Botswana hosted it last year. It was a great success. And again, the Forbes 30 under 30, where I champion from my desk the public sector license, government of Botswana, represent the government of Botswana with Forbes under 30. Global Citizen, I mean, they've had a presence in Africa, and current talks at how do we now we're going back into Africa again. So these platforms create a meeting place for young African entrepreneurs with their peers across the globe, where overnight they can actually able to network, find opportunity, and also up their game and put in put in the effort that they need to do for them to be able to realize their full potential. I mean, we're looking at AI, we're living in the advent of AI. AI is there. They also want to become, like their counterparts. We've got great successes that happen every day that we need to be selling those successes and telling the world about them. There's no way that Africa is going to be left behind. I mean, we're also participating in programs such as the space programs that are out there. In terms of the infrastructure development, I mean, look, the rail and road network, we have put in tons and tons of money into growing it. We'll live up to Cecil John Rhodes's dream of the Cape to Cairo railroad. We will continue that. We've got connectivity. Yes, I know the challenges that have been there with airline connectivity and also with the cost. And again, we're seeing more and more African countries that are landlocked that are now getting dry ports, through negotiations like Botswana maybe would have, rent some space from the coast where there can be a dry port for Botswana. We have that in Cape Town. That also eases the connectivity into Africa. And more than ever, Lex, we've had internet challenges. We're now at a point whereby internet connection is a non-negotiable. We want high speed connection. We're not going to negotiate it, just like the air we breathe. I mean, like in America, in the diaspora, without our internet in Africa, we literally do go crazy too. Yeah, the good governance and the institutional reform, we've had a number of impressive rankings from the various indexes. We also intend on becoming, high-income economies. Sustainability, too, is on the cards. ESG conversations are being held, and where corporations are now embracing, ESG, and we have a conscious to that. We have young Africans who are now advocate for climate change activists. We're all in that space. So more than ever, we have never been ready as a continent. And thank you, Liz, when we're highlighting that we now need to trust our young people. In platforms where I speak, I say we live in a time whereby children must be seen and heard. I know growing up, children were only to be seen and never be heard. But Madam Moderator Samke, I tell parents that, no, we need to embrace having these conversations with our children. We live in an era where no idea is a silly idea. Not too long ago, was it 2 months back, where I read in one of the Forbes magazines that it was a consortium of youth in Europe who were raising funds. And there was the youngest person in that consortium was 14 years old. Now, can you imagine relating that to an African context, a 14-year-old coming into a bank, telling you that, yes, this is the coming to a bank or just making a pitch that they're trying to raise $1 billion US. So this is where we're living in. There's no such thing as a crazy idea. Mothers on Mother's Day, I spoke again to that. Let's have conversations with our children. Let's see where we can support our children. I mean, African governments have been very, very intentional about having a big creative sector where they've partnered with iconic Hollywood icons, you know, the likes of Steve Harvey, Idris Elba, Tyler Perry, to come into Africa and have a footprint that help create their studios, because the only Africans can tell their story better. You know, we have the likes of Trevor Noah, who spent at least a good 8 to 10 years out in the United States. He's made a name for himself. Then the likes of Bernard Borg, you know, Davido, Jonathan Butler, and many more, you know, who've got to show the world the taste of the talent that Africa has. You know, there is no reason why in the very near future we can host a film festival. Over the Forbes Summit, I was able to get a lot of the creatives that have come into the summit. We were able to have a showcasing of 3 movie premieres. I mean, that was quite a highlight. It never been done before, but there we were. We had Africans from across the continent and in the diaspora. They spent 4 wonderful days together and were able to network, forge partnerships and collaboration, where this is very, very key for them to be keep their drive moment. We have recently, as African countries, signed onto the Africa Continental Trade Agreement. This is a landmark reform, you know, which is opening up trade between the countries. A vision that our leaders, may their souls rest in peace, you know, Kwame Nkrumah, Thomas Sankara, Patrice Lumumba had for Africa. Almost 60 years later, we're now realizing that, you know, this is a vision, and we're now actually intentional about implementing it. We're all signatories and all countries have all ratified, and we're all hands on deck. Opening of Africa's borders is next on the agenda. We've seen the hurdles that, you know, the regulatory, you know, we talk about the visas where a businessman or even anybody moving across Africa has been very, very tedious. Not too long ago, last week, Aliko Dangote made an announcement. Why do I need 35 visas to trade in Africa? Whereas somebody coming from Europe doesn't even need a visa or can get a visa on arrival. So as African policymakers, we're looking at that, and slowly, you know, we're now beginning to relax the visas. And I'm sure that next year, this time again, we'll be able to reflect and say, Helen, well, this is what the target is. How much of the target will we be able to achieve? And as I said, you know, we've never been open for more business as we are today. Sons and daughters of the soil, the time has now come. As Africans, we need to embrace one another, respect one another, love, see the value in one another, so that together, you know, we can come to a united Africa. I mean, the dictators are gone, who were there, who separated most of us, but we see the collaboration has never been so intentional and so deliberate. And we have our leaders on the continent now who are driving that. Very often the African Union meetings are all speaking to addressing the collaborations. Last month when we were in Botswana, early this month when we were in Botswana at the Forbes Under 30 Summit, together with Busi, we were able to speak about how we were facilitating one of the round tables, the Forbes Black. They had an assigned event, but we're also talking about what is the next mission, how do we go forward. We have these lovely platforms, but now the next thing that Busi and I were talking about, you know, having virtual trade missions. We appreciate that the trade missions come with a cost, and sometimes the timing's not right. So, you know, it's a work in progress that we will be bringing in Africa's thought leaders and professionals, both in the public and private sector, you know, to be doing the matchmaking virtually, so that we can drive forward Africa's intentions of opening up for Africa. Africa is ready for business, and we are, whilst on the ground, we have now put together you know, the regulatory reforms, we put together the transformational reforms that investors from the US coming in will expect to see. So we don't have to spend too much time, you know, trying to fix that. The ground is ready for Africa, and we welcome that investment that we are looking for. I will pause now, take any questions, and continue with the conversation.
Helen, thank you so much. That was beyond insightful. Thank you for touching on a broad array of themes in relation to just this event today. We truly appreciate you. So actually, we're going to be taking questions at the very end. Did you want to continue your speech, or this is it?
Oh, I'd left it at high. Let me pause for now, and then I wasn't sure with the timing, because I mean, if I talk, I won't stop. This is the passionate in
I
me.
love
So
it.
I beg your pardon?
Perfect. No, I said I love it. We love the passion. So
Yeah.
definitely you can pause for now, and we can kind of close out the conversation towards the end and have like an open space for questions, comment, and debrief. Okay.
Yeah. I hope I was audible. I'm speaking through my nose. I usually don't speak like this. It's the cold that I've got.
You were
Thank you very much.
top tier.
Thank you very much.
Top tier. Thank
Thank
you. And
you.
sorry for interjecting, Helen, but thank you so much.
Mhm.
So many takeaways from what you just spoke about. But I think one thing that really pricked my interest and stood out to me was where you mentioned, and I'm going to be very brief for the sake of time because we're literally running out of time. But when you talked about how do we elevate the conversation to start talking about value change development,
Yeah.
bringing value to Africa, bringing the businesses, bringing the investment to Africa, value change development. I'm going to write that down everywhere. So thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my sister. Thank you very much. Yeah.
All right. I'm going to transition over to my co-host, Samke, to introduce the next speaker.
Thank you, Nia, and thank you so much, Helen. I had the privilege of meeting Helen actually in Botswana, 2 weeks ago for Forbes 30 Under 30, and she really is as passionate in person as she has been on this stage today, and especially around policy reform. She sits in a privileged position where she actually gets to contribute to the policies around entrepreneurship and development of that sector in Botswana. And so when she says that there is a transformation in Africa, if we have this caliber of people sitting in our government structures, you can definitely tell that we are headed in the right direction. Now, I don't know if this program was rigged, but I seem to be introducing all these South Africans on the program. And next up is another woman who I have had the pleasure of engaging and interacting with, and that is Yavi Madurai. Yavi is a sought-after advisor across all three spheres of Africa's economy, being the private, public, and non-profit sectors. As a proud Pan-Africanist and advocate of African prosperity, she is best known as being the founder of the much-publicized African Prosperity Fund, or APF. In terms of her commercial interests and business activities, Yavi is the chair of the YMH Group, which incorporates the management consultancy, a global African trade agency, the African Prosperity Project, and the Operations Project Office of the African Prosperity Fund. As an advisor to governments, heads of state, and C-class executives, she is a strategist and a global speaker on matters of African economic transformation, especially with her expertise in the Continental Free Trade Agreement, always putting on her activism on women and youth inclusion at the heart of everything she says and does. So much so that it is the essence of her PhD research at one of the world's leading Ivy League universities, where she is currently studying on a full ride scholarship. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome one of my good sisters and fellow South African who is a global citizen, Yavi Madurai.
Hello, Samke. That was quite an introduction. I hope I can live up to part of it, written by my staff. But thank you so much, and thank you for having me. Jambo, as we say in Africa, in terms of hello, and it is a happy Africa Day from the continent of Africa. Just in terms of what I wanted to share today under the Bridges to the Diaspora, the topic. So I founded the African Prosperity Fund specifically to close the gap to African prosperity in my lifetime, in our lifetime. I'm a huge advocate of Africa's Blueprint Agenda 2063 in all of its dreams and its goals, because it is also a roadmap. As a strategist and as a management consultant in my day job, it's a roadmap. It gives us very specific instructions as to how to achieve the self-sustainability that the likes of our founding fathers, made the speech. Kwame Nkrumah made the speech today, 61 years ago. So under the ultimate objective of the Africa we want. Now, remember, it was brilliantly conceptualized by one of our older sisters, a mother figure, she's the architect of Africa's future, so to speak, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. So this document is genius in that but it hasn't really been fully understood by everyone in terms of how we are going to get there. So when I first consciously immersed myself in it, my first thought was, bugger that. Why do we just want self-sustainability? We're bigger than that. We should be aiming for unapologetic prosperity. And, you know, it's a matter of not being arrogant about it, but with what is in our ground. Why are we just aiming for self-sustainability? As a gender activist, one of my favorite stories that I start out a speech with is generally the one about the greatest sisterhood of all times. And it goes a little something like this. Long before social media magnified the sisterhood movement and gave us the memes that we all know today, long before Maya Angelou penned Phenomenal Woman, or Shaka Khan declared, I'm every woman, or Winnie Mandela said, you strike the woman, you strike the rock. And long before there was Oprah and Gail, there was the ultimate sisterhood of Mother Nature blessing Mother Africa with untold riches and wealth, precious metals, stones, minerals, and the most beautiful land in all of the world. Mother Africa's children, though, we're quite a bunch of entitled heirs, and we have squandered what has been given to us instead of using it all to make all future generations heirs even wealthier. So that is where I'm starting from today, and it is what is beneath our ground and all around us, as I said, that we should be aiming not just for self-sustainability over the next couple of years to Agenda 2063's goals, but for ultimate prosperity. So yes, there's the reality of life's challenges in Africa being poverty-driven. Yes, we have binding trade agreements that hold us ransom. Yes, we have made, when I say we, I don't mean me, but yes, we have made deals with the devil in terms of corruption, loans that go on for future generations, and entertaining and allowing conflict of more than 34 on the continent. Yes, we have taken on more than we can handle, probably way more than we can handle. So yes, I know and fully understand the reality of all these things, but we have something today in Africa that we have never had before, and that is the AFCFTA. And my sister Helen referred to it at the end of her speech. The African Continental Free Trade Area came into effect on the 1st of January 2021, and while it's not a silver bullet, so let me be very clear, we speak about it as though it's a silver bullet. It's not, in which the silver bullet of Africa's natural resources can be loaded. The historical intercontinental trade agreement is the answer to many of Africa's challenges, and it reverses many of the divisions that were created by colonization and still currently exist. My sister Helen referred to the fact that Dangote was the richest man in Africa, spoke at the Africa CEO Forum last week and said that he needs to get 35 visas, which is 100% true. And it comes down to the fact that we have held onto the borders that our former colonizers gave us and not went back to the borderless Africa that we once had before colonization. And therein lies the root of all of our problems, is that we now need to start activating and working on solutions for Africa's problems by Africans for Africans. Africa holds the largest reserves of cobalt, diamonds, platinum, and uranium. It is where 65% of the world's arable land is found, coupled with 10% of the planet's total internal renewable fresh water source and the talent and human capital of the world's youngest continent. Technically, we have everything the world needs, not just Africa, but we have everything that the world needs right here on our continent. So the bridges to the diaspora is rooted in the AFCFTA. The AFCFTA opens Africa to the world, and we need to treat our diaspora with special partnership treatment. What do we want to say what I do want to say? What I do want, my English is not Englishing. What I do want to say is that Africa is normally seen as, with our hands out. We are not in that space currently. We are in the space where we no longer need saviors. We need partners. I believe in three little words that has been said by President Paul Kagame of Rwanda: trade, not aid. You look to us in terms of what can we build partnerships and bridges in terms of trade, not aid. Today, our challenges and our problems are the opportunities for partnerships, for solution and wealth creation, and especially with our diaspora. I just want to end this by saying one of the projects that is coming from our African Prosperity Fund in the next few months, to give you an example, is to fund part, because the manufacturing gap is so wide in Africa that obviously there'll be trillions of dollars that are put into it in the future. But one of the things that we are focused on is closing that manufacturing gap in pharmaceuticals. Now, why? There was a historical decision by Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, on the 7th of December 2023, so just recently, what they call the AVMA, which is the African Vaccine Manufacturers Alliance, where from June this year, so in the next couple of weeks, all vaccines for Africa that is under aid mission that is distributed by Gavi through UNICEF will now be manufactured in Africa. The potential for that is twofold. The potential is that, and I don't know if you know this, but 50% of Africa do not have access to basic healthcare and basic medicine, which means that our most vulnerable are dying from basic diseases like diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure, hypertension, etc., etc., etc. So by this decision that was taken by Gavi, it then allows us to be able to not have Africans, especially mothers and children, die from diseases like diabetes that you and I take for granted. We take a pill, we move on, but yet there are people dying from it. So the first potential for this particular closing the manufacturing gap and the potential for partnership is that the ability to be able to manufacture not just vaccines, but obviously all pharmaceuticals on the continent, saving African lives, but also in that partnership under the AFCFTA, it drives potential business partnerships, it drives potential wealth creation, it drives so many different things from that particular aspect. So I just wanted to give you one example in terms of both how we are looking at it from an African Prosperity Fund, but also when we say bridges to the diaspora, it's not just about hands out, please can you give us money, please can you give us aid. This is not about a savior aspect. This is about how do we partner, how do we start building those bridges between the diaspora, and how do we start creating opportunities for partnership, opportunities for growth, opportunities for everyone to be able to drive the prosperity in Africa that I know that we are all wanting for future generations under the Africa we deserve. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yavi. Your passion certainly shining through there. And I love what you said about there being opportunities for us to actually create economically successful agreements and partnerships in for advancing African businesses, and especially beneficiation when we spoke about the minerals that are available in Africa, Africa being having the richest diamond, cobalt, platinum, and uranium minerals. One of the challenges that always comes up is that we do not beneficiate. So we do not get the benefit of these minerals. And looking at also the pharmaceutical transformation that you've spoken about and vaccines being actually created or manufactured in Africa, I hope that we are able to start having more of the value chain sitting in Africa, having more of the on the ground farmers, manufacturers being able to participate in the economic benefit that flows when we beneficiate and have the production chain sitting on the continent. And I will also speak to the elephant in the room, ensuring that our governments actually take part in advancing Africa for Africa's benefit and not for their own. Because in South Africa, during the COVID-19 lockdowns, we know that our health minister, former health minister, was actually found guilty of misappropriating funds, even when people were dying on a daily basis. Absolutely. And so we have to speak to the elephant in the room and speak to the fact that with the help of the diaspora, we'll be able or better able to actually make a success of Africa, despite any corruption or despite any government that may be seeking to do otherwise. But on that note, I want to hand over to Nia to introduce our next speaker and carry on this conversation we're having about Africa's diaspora and also advancing the continent. Nia?
Thank you so much, Samke, and just thank you so much, Yavi. You know, Samke, you mentioned that is this agenda rigged? Are we intentionally making you introduce all the South Africans? And my response to you is yes, because I do not want to be blamed for butchering names. Although I do need to challenge myself even more to learn the pronunciation. So yes, it was changed and tweaked in Nia's favor. But Yavi, and I do hope I am pronouncing your name very well. Thank you so much for such powerful speech. I think what really stood out for me, and not to be long-winded, because a lot of positive, great, powerful sentiments have been made. One key thing was what you said: prosperity across the board. And for me, that is what we should focus on for the continent. So at this time, let me introduce our next speaker. Our next speaker is Dora Dean Whitley. She's the founder, CEO of the Whitley Agency. Thought-provoking, results-driven, cutting-edge, business-minded executive are a few words to describe Dora Dean Whitley. A 15-year Atlanta native with Cameroonian origins, Dora completed her undergrad studies in exercise and sports science with a minor in biology at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. Raised by a mother who is a world-renowned cardiologist and a father who is an architect, math and science were the foundation of Dora's childhood. She's fluent in French, English, and moderately in Spanish. Dora utilizes her cultural foundation to diversify her talent and skills. Dora began her professional career as an entertainment business banker with one of Metro Atlanta's top community banks, where she managed a multi-million-dollar portfolio and received multiple accolades. In 2007, Dora launched Trois Degrees Management and Media, TDMM, a global talent, business management, media, and consulting firm with remote offices in Paris and Yaoundé. Please join me now in welcoming Dora Dean Whitley.
Thank you so much for having me. Good afternoon to my esteemed colleagues of the diaspora. A great welcome to all of the guests, who are here with us today. And, more importantly, my thanks to the visionary, Dibbo, who's the founder and executive director for the Society of Africans in the Diaspora. It is stated, I am native Cameroonian and one of the founding CEOs of the Whitley Agency. We're a global agency of record specializing in marketing, media, mass communication, and management services for small to mid-sized businesses, corporations, nonprofits, and government across various sectors, such as CPG, food and beverage, entertainment, film and TV, and venture capital, just to name a few. And so our secret sauce and our key pillar is really accelerating the scale of U.S. businesses into international footprints with a focus on Africa, and more importantly, serving as a diasporic bridge. We've heard this kind of being the underlying thread today, right? Which is building this bridge and being a bridge with the resources that we've been giving. And so at the agency, we are steadfast in serving as this bridge between the two continents for an exchange of resources, entrepreneurship, education, training, facilitating the entry points for business to get established into various countries across the continent, and also investments and access to capital. The cross collaboration between the US and Africa will be critical for the future development and growth of creatives on the continent. To be able to scale to their full global brand potential, to generate greater wealth for their communities, and to enhance their social environments. Business knowledge, including administrative capacity, I will say, is one of the most critical components to the sustainability of businesses in Africa. Investors are willing to invest once policies and regulations are put in place. However, they will be looking for proof that businesses are sustainable at its core, and it starts with the basics. Today, the focus of my remarks will be on accelerating creativity and innovation in Africa. It is very clear that Africa's booming creative industry over the past few years has led to the generation of great global economic impact. It has accelerated rate of jobs, created billions in revenue across music, across film, across TV, across fashion, and across art, and what I will essentially coin as cultural drivers, and a great demand for infrastructure development, a greater demand for training, for education, for resources, for policy shifts to maintain pace with demand and scale. The world's eyes have opened on the rich culture and talent emerging on the continent and attracting global interest like never before. We see now that annually about $2.25 trillion are generated globally from the creative industry sector. And within that, Europe, North America, Asia, and the Pacific account for about 93, 94% of that revenue and 85% of job creations. Africa represents 3% of that revenue, which is equitable to about $60 million annually. Africa is in a great position to further that increase by creating vehicles that will facilitate access to capital for the creative entrepreneurs, by formalizing policy to allow for international exchange, program development for investment processes, and infrastructure to support the creative economy fast scale. In order to boost investments in the physical and digital infrastructure to support the creative economy, creatives must have a full understanding of the mode of investment that's going to be suitable to their business model, and it doesn't matter the industry. Additionally, establishing inter-country collaborative systems with business accelerators, with incubators for the growing youth population that will provide business development, technical support, pre and post investment, as well as dedicated funds within each country to meet the specific development and growth that's needed for this creative industry to make impact on Africa from an economic perspective, from a social perspective, and from an ideological perspective. So when speaking of dedicated funds, the opportunity stands for governments to create financing programs designed specifically for creative entrepreneurs and startups, such as venture capital funds, grants, loans with favorable interest rates. Entrepreneurship is a pivotal pathway to further the development of each country that will serve, I believe, as a driving force to fuel innovation, economic growth, and social progress. I will close out with government policies needed to support the overall development of the industry, where I believe it should begin with a systematic development of intellectual property and rights, technology transfers that will enhance productivity, competitiveness, and accelerate industrialization. Firm resolutions to IP rights will enhance the ability of African entrepreneurs to compete in global markets that will add value to their work and economy. And to close, news. News plays an important role in influencing investment decisions. Media today, as we know it, travels at a split of a second. News on Africa must begin to take a higher focus on disseminating good and positive information that will encourage policymakers, the general population, and potential investors, elevating the stories of creative entrepreneurs breaking barriers across each country, and shifting excessive energies now spent in policies to equally important global spheres. Happy Africa Day to all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dora Dean Whitley. That was very, very well said, very powerful. I do have a very quick question for you. And of course, again, I keep saying this for the sake of time. I don't want to be long-winded, but just something really stood out to me where you said, and this is true, investors are willing to invest, but there is a problem with sustainability. From your perspective, aside from the government creating models to help entrepreneurs and businesses, what can the private sector and businesses do to help with sustainability in terms of their own businesses? And very, very briefly, if you don't mind.
Thank you so much, Ian, for that question. When it comes to sustainability, it comes down to the foundation, which is what I was speaking on from an educational level, and ensuring that your plans are in alignment with where you're going to get the investments from, understanding basically and educating yourself on the process of investments, pre and post investment. That is critical. The money is out there. But without that foundational knowledge, you're not going to be readily positioned to access the capital that's out there for you, and understanding the processes in order that will apply as you continue to scale your businesses. So I think that's the critical component, is the educational and learning curve.
Thank you so much, Dora. I want to just pass it over to Sam K to introduce our next speaker.
Thanks, Nia, and thank you so much to Dora as well, who I had the pleasure of meeting in Botswana. It seems that there's a Forbes 30 under 30 attendees reunion here on this stage today. And again, speaking about the creative economy and the creative sector in Africa, there is a lot to be said about how the world consumes our culture, a lot to be said about how our culture is sometimes stolen by major brands such as Louis Vuitton, such as Balenciaga, and this notion that the world loves our culture and not us is something that we need to investigate and look into, to say, how do we get allies who will be able to defend African creatives and African intellectual property, where perhaps we may not be able to be in those rooms and defend ourselves. And so it's quite important on this being Africa Day that we pull in Africa's allies across the world, both those who are of African descent and those that aren't. But next up, we have Peter Quesada, who is a venture capitalist, operator, and founder with over 10 years of experience in the African technology sector. He is currently the expansion lead at ShipShap, and before that has held significant roles at Jumia Group and Future Africa, where he served as head of investment. Peter was also part of the team that advised the Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority on establishing an innovation fund. Peter has founded 2 companies, Digest Africa and Steward, raising just under $1 million in venture capital for these ventures from investors such as Future Africa, Ventures Platform, Microtraction, and Founders Factory Africa. He is currently the expansion lead, as mentioned, at ShipShap, a company developing shipping infrastructure and tools for merchants in Africa and the MENA region. I cannot think of a better person to speak to us about the challenges of being a business raising funds, an African business raising funds, and also the role of the diaspora in advancing Africa's agenda than our next speaker, Peter Quesada. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you so much, Sam K. I don't know if you can hear me. Just want to make sure.
Yes, we can.
All right. And I think I'll take the opportunity to say Happy Africa Day to everyone here. I guess what I'm going to do today is I'm going to leverage my experience and talk about the need to leverage the diaspora to build large businesses as the answer to some of the problems that we face as a continent. And part of what I'm going to reference is a couple of people that have done that very successfully, but also the need to have more and more of these people come up. When people talk about the value that the diaspora can bring to Africa, much of the time they focus on the remittances, which is a very, very sizable number. I think it's around $50 billion. We are trending towards that number right now. But while this is necessary, there is also a need for us to look at the potential that the diaspora has for the continent. And I want to shift the narrative to focus on cultivating the next crop of Adebayo Ogunlesi and then also Serunjoji, who are also part of the African diaspora. And if these names are not familiar to some of you here, Serunjoji is a Ugandan that has built a company called Chipakash. It was last valued at $2 billion. Another Adebayo that I've mentioned is a Nigerian in the diaspora that sold his company to BlackRock for $12.5 billion. But before I go into that, I would love to briefly talk about the history that lies between the US diaspora as well as the African continent as a way to sort of come and bridge, create a bridge towards what I'm trying to drive the point home to. So the history really between the two groups that I've mentioned is very, very deep. And of course, it starts with the painful legacy of the transatlantic slave trade, as well as the shared struggle for freedom and justice across the two groups. But despite this dark history, actually, you can look at the destinies of both groups and see that they are intertwined with the African diaspora, playing a very significant role in the shaping of both places. For example, the civil rights movement in America was very, very profound in influencing the anti-colonial and independence movement across Africa. Well, fostering that sense of solidarity as well as purpose, a sense of shared purpose for both the Africans as well as those in the US diaspora. And many African countries actually, since independence, have looked towards the US for both support and inspiration. Now, today, this relationship is actually evolving and taking a different shape. Some of the speakers talked about trade, the need to emphasize trade, not aid. And the other thing also is really seeing a lot of our best talent actually leaving the continent to move to the US. If you look at the numbers currently, you have more than 2.1 million sub-Saharan Africans living in the US, and over 100,000 people joining them every year. And some of these are the most educated, with nearly half of them actually having at least a bachelor's degree. Now, what am I trying to point to here? I think there is a need for us to realize that these are some of our best bets at solving our problems as a continent, and we need to equip them. So we need to look for the most educated, most qualified, and most ambitious Africans in the diaspora. And then we have to task them with solving some of the most pressing problems we are facing as a continent. And one of the ways we can do this is by giving them the support they need. And that can be in terms of capital, the networks, and the expertise that the United States actually has to offer. And there is a precedence here, like I mentioned earlier on, with Ham Serun Joji, who has built a very, very, very interesting business that is solving payment challenges across Africa. And the other, again, is Adebayo, who has built infrastructure partners that has over $100 billion of assets under management. And what is common between these two? All of them were born in Africa, moved to the US, but what they've used as capital has almost all of it come from the US. So for me, this shows and it indicates a willingness of the US and the US investors to actually invest in ambitious Africans that are in the diaspora, but also looking to solve the problems back home. So there is that shared need to solve these problems that are affecting the African continent, because there is, at the end of the day, a shared mutual interest at the end of the day, if I may emphasize that. So the challenge we are now having here is that there's a mismatch between the talent that actually can solve these problems. And I'm speaking from my experience as a venture capitalist, because we found that if you look at the data on where people that are solving African problems using technology or trying to innovate around these problems, but then also where they went to school, you're going to realize that you have Harvard Business School, you have Wharton, you have Stanford, but the overarching trend is that most of them went to the West. So they went and studied from there, or they were born there, and then they realized that they have this task to come back and solve these problems. What else do you see from that trend is that the people that are financing them are mostly from the US. The US is the largest investor in African innovation, if you look at the numbers, followed by Europe. So we need to build a bridge that can actually bring the three pieces together. So the first piece is the African diaspora. The second piece is the African continent, and in this case, the opportunities, which you can also look at as the challenges. And then the final piece is the resources that the US has to offer. That can be in form of education, in form of the capital, but then in form of the best practices they've been able to build over time around how they've solved some of their problems around infrastructure, around communication, logistics, transport, and so on and so forth. So what we have as our number one resource beyond just tapping into the remittances from the diaspora right now is the talent itself that we can be able to now come and take advantage of. So we must build that bridge. And I think if we do that and do it the right way, it's going to create an environment that encourages risk-taking, innovation, and collaboration. Because if you speak to a lot of people right now that are in the diaspora, one of the biggest challenges they're facing is they have nowhere to start from. So let's say someone was born in the US, they went to some of the best schools, maybe they're working with some of the best companies, but they're interested in solving a problem in Africa. There is nowhere they can start from. So being able to give them that starting point is going to be very, very crucial for us. And I think in the end, it's going to foster a culture of entrepreneurship that is aimed at solving some of our most difficult problems. And these are needed for us to move forward. So So if you look at right now the industry that I'm in, which is shipping, you find that if you're going to move a product from Uganda, where I'm taking this call from, one of the products you're going to see from Uganda is shea butter products, and these are loved from all over the world. We have some of the best raw materials for the for shea butter products, but the cost of shipping is usually 3 to 5 times that of the cost of the goods. So being able to build that infrastructure is going to be very, very important for us to bridge that gap. But how you build that infrastructure, you need the right talent to match it with the right opportunity. But then beyond that, now you need the right partners. So if you do this, I'm sure at the end of the day, we shall not have 1 or 2 Ham Serene Georges of Chipakash, and then Adebayo of JIP, and then also Mo Ibrahim of Celtel. But we shall become, we shall have a whole lot of Africans, whether they are born in the diaspora or they went there, but coming back home, or staying there and helping us solve these problems. And in the end, I think we will be able to strengthen the ties between the African diaspora community, the African continent, and the United States. So thank you for listening, and I want to once again say Happy Africa Day to everyone else here. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Peter. And please keep your camera on, because I have some points of discussion that I'd like to put to you. And I'm going to put on my women's advocate hat here and say, in the world today, we know that less than 2% of all venture capital goes to women. And also on the wearing the hat of a Pan-African citizen and an advocate for Africans, the technology unicorns that have come out of Africa, there has been the criticism that these were actually not founded by Africans born in Africa. You've got Jumia, which was founded by Europeans with their African partners. You've got Flutterwave, which was founded by Africans, but who grew up in the US. Same with Andela and Chipakash. So my 2 questions would be, number 1, how do we make sure that that we develop Africans in Africa to attract international investments, especially US investments, which is where the majority of the investments in the companies I've mentioned has come from? And number 2, how do we make sure that women are not left behind in the digital revolution and in the VC revolution, where we are seeing more and more people being able to create wealth for themselves through entrepreneurship?
Awesome. Thank you, Samke. And I think what you've just mentioned is something that I'm very passionate about. If I give you my background, I was born in Uganda, educated here throughout from primary until undergrad. I've spent time mostly between Nigeria and Uganda. And every time, it was frustrating for me trying to raise money for my first company, because I didn't sound like my colleagues that went to that grew up in the US. I didn't look like some of my colleagues that were that were white, and that was a bit frustrating. But then at the same time, you got to understand that there were biases that were inbuilt in how the capital was coming, because much of the capital that's coming into Africa is coming from endowment funds in the US, foundations, family offices. So I think the solution is a ground-up solution where we need to ask our governments to be able to step up and give us capital. And if they can do that, it's going to come with our own rules at the end of the day. I'm happy that, and I think part of the work that I did in Nigeria was supporting the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority. And what that did was that they were seeding a new crop of general partners at funds, right? Fund managers. And these were Nigerians. And I'm seeing the same thing in Uganda and a couple of other African countries that are trying to become limited partners in funds. So that way they can dictate how the money should be spent, where it should be spent. So I think we need to ask our governments to be able to earmark some capital on the side, some money on the side that can be able to go towards funds that are solving our problems. Because my worry here, being in this industry of venture capital, is that if the money comes from the US, even the investment committee members are going to come from the US, and they look at the world through their lenses. So they're trying to solve problems that are unique to the US, but not unique to Africa. And I think that is just going to be a continuation of the same challenge we had with the aid. So there has to be need for tasking people like Dangote, our governments, our corporates, and so on and so forth, be able to put capital on the table so that we are able to understand each other, be able to understand our needs, and then we can make a decision on what is actually our priority as a continent. But at the same time, I still think that there is a role to be played by allies and friends of Africa. And those can come in form of the diaspora, which for me is important for us to build these bridges, because there are things we don't need to replicate or to do from ground, start from scratch rather. There are things where we just need to copy or at least borrow where it has been done already. If you look at the venture capital industry, for example, it's now coming to roughly 60 years old, and there are things that were done 50 years ago we don't need to do right now because the industry is keeping on moving. So we just need friends that can be able to guide us and tell us, don't do this and that. My worry right now is that we're doing it in the sense of we have a master and then sort of a slave rather than a partner. So I think we need to move our conversation towards that kind of direction. We also need the Africans that are born in the diaspora, because a lot of these people are extremely privileged. Because the thing about building a venture capital business is that it's a very, very risky thing to do, that you want people that have a certain form of safety and privilege to do it. A lot of people in the African continent, you talked about the Dangote passport issue, you're going to find that raising capital, you're going to have to move across multiple countries. You're going to need to hire from multiple countries and move on the spot to go and, let's say, expand here, expand there. And these people have these privileges. They can leverage their passports. And so we need to have parallel conversations, but at the same time, those that are privileged, that still want to help Africa, and they have the ties back to Africa, especially those that were born there or they went there, I think we still need them because they're going to help us get there faster. But also, I've found that there is an incentive for people to actually give back. I'm a beneficiary of that. I'm a Jumia alumni, and to be fair, I don't think with my background, I would have been able to learn how to build a venture-backed business without Jumia helping me. Similarly with Future Africa, when I was at Future Africa, I was working with Nyolua Boyeji, who is one of the founders of Mandela and Flutterwave. And without him, I would have not been able to know. So I think we're building the bridges slowly by slowly, and we shall get there. But we need to task the key stakeholders, in this case, some of our wealthiest people, the corporates that are making money out of Africa, and then also the governments to come to the table and help. Now, the question of the gender inequality in the venture capital space, I think is also a very, very important one, especially that if you look at in terms of consumption numbers, most of the consumers, especially across Africa, are women. And then increasingly, some of the decision makers are women. So it's important that we take that into account. One of the things that is a positive, if you look at the data, is actually that Africa is ahead of the rest of the world in terms of venture capital numbers, partly because the capital that is coming into Africa is from DFIs, and they have ESG mandates. So they require that at least that capital should be deployed in a way that caters to the minority groups. And I think that is helping. Now, of course, that also goes against my suggestion of we need to have local capital, but at least in the pursuit of trying to make sure that we are not just funding male founders, I think that is helping answer the question. Now, another thing that is actually happening that I'm happy about is the female-focused funds that I think are also answering that. So one of the things I love about our industry also is that problems actually are opportunities. So because of that, data from BCG that was just published recently indicated that actually, female-founded, companies are more likely to actually succeed compared to male-founded companies. And you're now seeing the role funds that are coming up with that thesis of saying, you know what, I'm just going to bet on female founders. So I'm hoping that with ESG, mandates, and then also the fact that there is a gap here that actually makes economic sense, we are going to see gap close over time. But I think I would also want to see capital that is really, really organic, that is not just coming from the West without a clear sense of partnership. So we'd love that also coming in locally, but with a mandate to fund female founders. So that is what I could say about that. It's a very, very, I wouldn't say complex, but it's still an issue that shouldn't be discussed in 2024. But yes, we are still here, and I'm hoping that we can just keep having this conversation, but also beyond that, we can keep seeing change over time. But definitely from 2015, where the industry was starting to document everything, and where we are today, I think we've made a lot of strides around that.
Samke, are you there? Did we lose Samke?
Yes,
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, she's here.
I was saying that thank you very much for that contribution, Peter. And I'd like to add that we need to start seeing more patient capital as well, because we are seeing VC capital that is looking for fast growth companies, and not all companies that actually solve society's needs will fit the VC profile. And so I'd like to see how, as we move forward to a more conscious world, that we will be able to ring fence some funding for those companies that take a little bit longer to see returns, but are absolutely crucial, not only to Africa's growth and benefit, but also the rest of the world. Nia, over to you.
Thank you
Thank you.
so much, Samke. Thank you so much, Peter. Very, very powerful speech you gave. I do want to do a very quick pulse check. How's everyone feeling? Can I get a full view of everyone? Is everyone feeling good? We're good. We're good. Everyone's happy, excited. I see the smiles. We have 2 more speakers to go. Okay, 2 more speakers. So just hold on tight. And then we can have a community conversation about all of the topics and sentiments above. I do want to challenge everyone, just moving forward, those watching online, the speakers here. You know, I have moderated a lot of conversation on the development in Africa. And what I tend to hear, and not saying we're doing this today, is everyone saying, we need to do this, we need to do this, but there's no solution that is heavily provided. So I want to really comment, Sanke, for just pushing our speakers even more and saying, you know, how do we do this? It's a how do we, not just we need to or we have to, but how do we do this? And so as you let this conversations and comments and commentaries and sentiment marinate in you, keep thinking for yourself, what are the solutions to developing the continent across the board? So at this time, I will introduce our next speaker. Our next speaker is Brian Maina. Brian is the founder of Eco Rafiki Africa, an eco-friendly social He is the founder of Eco Rafiki Africa, an eco-friendly social enterprise combating plastic pollution by introducing biodegradable and compostable tableware as an alternative to plastics. He is one of the founding leaders of SDG Youth Wave, also the leader of African Youth for Climate, and was the Youth for Climate delegate representing Africa at Prep COP26 in Milan, Italy. Also the official youth delegate and speaker at Conference of Parties, and also a speaker and delegate at Conference of Youth and Conference of Parties in Glasgow, United Kingdom. Please join me, everyone, in welcoming Brian Maina from Kenya.
Thank you so much, Nia, for having me. Thank you so much, Tibo, for this kind invite, as well as Busi. I feel like me coming in now, being the young person in this conversation, I've listened to all of you esteemed colleagues, and there's so much to learn from you. There's so much passion about Africa. And whenever I speak about Africa, I go back to what drives me as an African youth. It's more or less, what are the key pivotal things that we should be pushing now? Every single moment we're speaking about Africa, I keep reminding myself that the biggest thing that we need to carve out with, the biggest thing that we can push in Africa is narrative shift. How do we make sure that every other African is able to tell their story? But not just about telling their story, but we're able to push it positively to so many more people that we can be able to build a convergence against it. Apart from that, I've listened to Peter, I've listened to Dora, Yavi, Mampane, Helen, and Liz. And what I've taken out of this is I've been forced to change up my entire speech, because what I was saying was very good, and I really needed to make sure that I emphasize on that. I heard Yavi speak about the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, and that what brings up to Africa. As I build upon this speech that I'm trying to make here, is that Africa currently and the creative industry presents an immense growth potential. With burgeoning youth population, increasing urbanization, and the rising middle class, we are witnessing the transformation of consumption patterns. Our continent is rich in cultural diversity, the creative talent, and that spans multiple sectors. Despite this immense potential, they still have significant challenges that we must overcome to unlock the full promise of the African creative industry. We must capitalize on the factors that have fueled the growth of African creative content thus far. The increasing use of digital platforms and the global appetite of diverse, authentic content are key drivers. We must leverage on the global digital platforms, and we must distribute African creative products more effectively, reaching wider audiences and creating new opportunities for our artists and innovators. To further increase this kind of reach, we must encourage investments, and these investments will go into the creative sector from both public and private sources. Developing partnerships with governments, international investors, and organizations can provide the necessary policies, capital, and technical know-how to drive innovation and growth formalizing, as well as formalizing the creative industry, which is very essential because as we will try and realize the full economic potential, we have to understand that involving creatives and the structure that needs to be built and the standards that need to be upheld have to come in and support the full professional growth of the economic stability that we're trying to recognize in these creative entrepreneurs. Before I conclude, I'd love to highlight some of the key things that I've had here. One has been more or less on shifting narrative. Two has been more or less on how we can shift funding. And I think Peter has really highlighted that because we need to have a systems change on how we start looking at funding and fully understanding who are we as Africans. Are we also able to trust each other and invest in each other? This whole conversation of waiting for aid from the Western countries should stop now. We have what it takes. I listened to Yavi highlight the potential of Africa, not just the potential, but what we hold. When she spoke about the 65% of the arable land that we have, when she spoke about the more than 45% of all the minerals that we have that can move us to a greener world. You know, when we speak about 80% of the youth being below the ages of 35, and when we speak about that also, when you break it down further and say 60% of our youth is still below the ages of 14. So that means that we have the future workforce. So we're able to also tick out the box on job creation. So it's a matter of us now coming in and asking ourselves, what's really missing and what do we have to do? I've had so many young people sit down with policymakers and say, oh, this is what I'm thinking of doing. But as a person who's been fortunate enough now to sit at the highest level of advising the special envoy and also the president's office, now I sit down with young people and I say to them, don't just give me the ideas you think are needed. Come to me and say, these are ideas that we've already started implementing and this is how best we can build on them. As I conclude, the potential for creativity and innovation in Africa is boundless. By addressing the challenges and leveraging the opportunities, we can build a vibrant, sustainable creative industry that drives economic growth, fosters cultural expression, and enhances social cohesion. Let us work together to accelerate the creativity and innovation in Africa, empowering our youth and showcasing our talents to the world. Thank you so much for having me. And again, as every other speaker has wished you, happy Africa Day as we celebrate 61 years of being in this beautiful continent.
Thank you so much, Brian. Thank you. And thank you for the work you do. It's really nice to hear where you sit as an advisor to the president and that you have a seat at this table. I think that's what we want more of that. We want more people to be in those spaces to directly impact and effect change. I do have a very quick question for you. You know, Peter mentioned how in order for us to increase funding, we need a chain, right? From the diaspora, from the government, from just across the board. And he did mention how we can make this happen. So I definitely don't want to go back to that. But from your perspective, how can we do that? How can we push the government? How can we help private sector to increase this funding? Like what system needs to be put in place? Because like I said earlier, we tend to say, let's do this, but we want more solution based. So you having this perspective or this, you being a person who sits as an advisor to the president, how would you recommend we create that system of funding to help all of these businesses? Is Brian there?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that question here. I think what's really key to start with is and I think Peter would agree with this, is for us to first understand what is giving and what is this kind of fund we speak about. For the longest time, and the challenge that we face as Africans is because we do not also acknowledge the kind of fund that we've been giving back to our communities for a long period of time. When we say that we want to start with governments, before you go to a government, you should have to first acknowledge that systems change starts with you. When you sit down in your family, are you giving back to the community? And when you say giving, we're not saying that you have to do major things. I always try and remind Africans that there's a sense of black tax. You know, you're born in an African family, you ought to provide to your juniors, you know, or to your family at a certain point in life. Those are the forms of giving that we have to start by acknowledging first as Africans. Two, we have to create a form of trust between us and government, as a private sector. The reason why you see, and I always say this, Dangote being as big as he is in Africa, most of his investments, as of a point, you will find that most of these are big billionaires are not fully investing in Africa, but also investing outside the world. Why? Because there's a sense of trust that exists there. We ought to create the sense of trust in Africa. We ought to understand that we all can work together and build the future of a continent we want to see. Someone said that we're not building the Africa of tomorrow. The Africa we need is the Africa of now. And so when I sit in that seat, my main job is to see how best we can create an ecosystem, one that's very welcoming to both policymakers, stakeholders, philanthropists, and different partners, where we are asking them, what are some of the caveats that you need? What are some of the challenges that you face? But also, what are some of the ways that we as government can come on board and support you in making sure that this is actually something that you can collaborate on? Just recently, I believe you saw that we hosted the IDA Representative Summit. We're also hosting the AFDB annual bank meeting that's going to be taking place in the next 2 days. What are we saying about this? We're not saying that Kenya is a hub for economic growth. We are saying that we as Africans can come together. When we see some of the challenges that we're facing from climate change, we cannot be fighting for a world or investing in a world whereby we don't know whether we're going to be there tomorrow. So we have to first by inviting ourselves to ask ourselves, well, what kind of change can we bring on board? And this is why we are saying that there is an open door where investors can come and work directly with governments, and they can collaborate and build bigger and better.
Thank you so much, Brian. I have a lot of follow-up questions, but we're going to take it offline. We're definitely going to take it offline. So thank you so much. I'm going to pass it over to Samke. But very well said. I'm going to pass it over to Samke to introduce our final speaker for today.
Thanks, Nia. Our final speaker is coming through in a pre-recorded video message, and a little bit about him. Dr. Yetunde A. Odubesan Omede is director at the Office of Community and Civic Engagement and a professor of Global Affairs and Politics at the HPG department. At FSC, she is responsible for overseeing institutional-wide initiatives that fosters civic and community engagement. As a faculty member in the History, Politics, and Geography department, Dr. Yetunde teaches African politics, American foreign policy, and others. She is a pre-academic who has extensive practitioner and academic-based experience in global affairs, foreign policy, higher education, and institutional development. She's a four-time author with books written on balance and leadership, and sits on various boards that focus on global policy for sustainable development, women political leadership, global education initiatives, and human rights. Let's take a look at this video message from Dr. Yetunde.
Hi, happy Africa Day 2024. My name is Dr. Yetunde Omede. I am a professor of global affairs and politics, and also the director of the Office of Community and Civic Engagement at the State University of New York, FSC. It's an honor to commemorate with you today and to celebrate with the Sade Institute and our wonderful hosts, Nia and Samke, on this joyous occasion. As you know, the whole continent of Africa is celebrating all of its tremendous achievements, as well as having the moment to reflect on many of the challenges along the way. As you know, the African Union was established in 1963, really celebrating and formalizing a form of unity and also partnership for the development of the African continent since its decolonization era. With that being said, we diasporans have also championed the tenets of the African Union and also have waved our flags very high so that wherever our respective countries are mentioned, we are great reflections of it. We also have a social responsibility to ensure that wherever we reside all over the world, that we are, carrying our accomplishments proudly, that we are representing our representative countries proudly. We are also reflecting and reminiscing on a lot of the challenges that the country has been through, and many of the countries in the African continent have underwent. Without hesitation, we know that there have been many human rights challenges, there have been many environmental issues, there have been many governmental and leadership issues. However, this is a day of celebration, and we take this day to acknowledge the many people, hundreds and thousands of people who have worked tirelessly to bring the African continent into a state of respect, into a place of economic development, into a place of unity and freedom for all. And we also honor those who are also working tirelessly hard in their respective countries to ensure that our government leaders rise to the challenges of ensuring a democratic country for all. And we thank many of our leaders here in the diaspora, here in the United States and around the world, for always making their own country proud, for waving their flags high and also moving the continent forward. We take this day to reflect and to see how we can do it better next year, how we can do it better in the future, how we can ensure that we continue to develop our young people, our institutes of education, which are extremely important in heralding a new future for Africa. So thank you so much for having me at this Africa Day 2024 celebration. There's so much to be said, but I want to take this moment and take this opportunity to commemorate with everyone and to also stand side by side with all who are working tirelessly to make Africa the beacon of light that it continues to be. Thank you so much.
Powerful and wonderful words there from Dr. Yetunde. Ladies and gentlemen, this conversation was supposed to be an hour long, but we are nearing 2 hours. And that just speaks to the diversity of views, to the well thought out points put forward, and also to the excellent expertise that we have in the room, where we could go on and on unpacking the challenges faced by Africa, and more importantly, as Nia mentioned, speaking to the solutions. Nia, what do you think?
I am having a good time. It went by so fast, Samki. I had no idea there were 2 hours until you mentioned it. This has been so engaging. I see Liz is still here, Brian, Dora, Yavi. Like, this has been so engaging and so amazing. I feel honored to be in y'all's midst. And forgive my use of the word y'all. It's very Houston, very Texas. I am an African Texan. But it has been amazing. I have learned so much, Samke. So many takeaways. Any takeaways on your end, Samke?
My biggest takeaways were definitely around the fact that we have a very tangible and visible policy reform, and that was so explicitly highlighted by Helen. I also love what Liz said, having worked with different institutions around the world, that we actually need, as Africa, to start listening, and not only listening to, but engaging young Africans as a strategic move for Africa's prosperity. Georgie is not on the line with us, but I was so touched and humbled and actually inspired by the fact that she has 100% manufactured product in one of the US's biggest retailers, being Target, and that gives me hope about the future and opportunities that exist for African products and exporting our products instead of us being a net importer of goods and services. And yeah, Dora had some words for us in terms of the capital being there, but our local businesses needing to show that they are sustainable and that investors will get their returns. I mean, I've got notes and notes and notes.
Likewise. Likewise.
So listen, if you don't want to be here until Tuesday, I think I will wrap it up. But all the speakers had very valuable inputs today. Nia?
Can I just echo all of your sentiments? And if I go on with all my takeaways, like you said, we're going to be here till not even Tuesday, Samke, maybe next weekend. We're going to have to take pee breaks here. We don't want to do that. But I will say one thing though that really stood out to me, and I think everyone needs to just kind of take this word, was what Helen said. It's how do we elevate the conversation and start talking about value change development, bringing more value to the continent. That was just a aha moment for me across the board. But at this time, I just want to close out by saying thank you again, echoing everything that Samke has said. Thank you for taking the time on this Saturday. It's not easy to take time off on Saturday for a conversation, so we do appreciate every one of you. I'm going to pass it over to the director as Deborah for a short close out for today.
Hello. Why okay. Hey, hello everyone. Thank you all for joining us this very day, 2024 Africa Day, US Africa Diaspora Summit. Thank you. This is how we strengthen the pipeline to power. This is how we strengthen the pipeline to prosperity, to what we want Africa to become. Thank you for sharing your insight, your views and your perspective in all. Samke, thank you for taking the notes. I hope you can share your notes with us. And also to each and every one of us, I think we should be able to go and pick one or two things from these very conversation today and find a way to tap in, find a way to connect the dot, find a way to support initiative that will benefit not just today, not just the present, but the future of Africa, the future of what we want Africa to become. What I will say is this: we are said in the US, in Houston, in New York, we're tapping into what is going on. I was with Lise last year when she did COPS Africa engagement in New York. Thank you for the invitation. We need to be in the room where decisions are made on Africa, in Africa. Thank you for all that you do. Ellen, thank you for sharing all that has been done in Botswana with Forge Black, with the global community that you're building in Botswana. We want to be part of it. We want to be part of it. And thank you. We spoke this morning, and you just pour into me in terms of, hey, let's just talk. No honorable, no protocol. Let's just get to the work. Let's get the work done. And those are the things that we need to do more, not just title or protocol, but let's get to do work that will transform Africa the way we want it to be. And my friends Samke and Nia, thank you for piloting this program. What I will ask is this: if there's a possibility, I'll ask everyone if we can share people's email and we can all be in the same room, whether through email, and keep connecting the dots. There are things I want to say now that I really want to pick brands brain on some sudden initiative, and just connect with Ellen, with some of the people that we have in Houston. Maybe they will be part of 30 under 30 Forbes Black, and I would want to say thank you to a friend of the house as well. She is watching and she is in Houston, Busi. Thank you, Busi, for bringing us these amazing people to share their opinion and perspective. Thank you all. We will be as said tonight. It's gonna be a relaxed environment, a relaxed get together where we have dinner together. I hope you that are online can join us next year in person to break bread with us. But thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you, Samke. Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you so much for having me, Debo.
Thank you.